My name is Graham Jackson, and I've had the privilege of serving as a YWAM'er in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada for over 2 decades. The population of the Greater Victoria region is 345,000. It is primarily a government city, as it is the seat of the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia. It has 2 universities, it has a growing tech industry, it is the home of a number of First Nations communities. It is also the home of the Pacific Naval Fleet for the Canadian Forces. And most of all, it is known as a tourist destination. Cities are complex. I like the TED Talk quote that I heard a few years ago. A city is not a fixed coordinate, but rather an evolving relationship between a place and its inhabitants. Globally, cities are growing at a rate of 1.6 million people a week. In 2008, the first urban generation came into existence, with over 50% of the world's population now living in cities. We are now the first urban generation in human history. In his book, Finding God in the City, Brad Stanley poses this question: as the first urban generation in human history, how does the church define its mission in an ever-increasing urban environment? I'd like to take that question one step further. How do we as YWAM'ers work with the church in the urban environment to help define the church's mission in an ever-increasing urban world? A couple of years ago at a regional YWAM meeting, I was sharing how God used our YWAM ministry through our interface with local ministerials to bless the church of the city. I gave the YWAMers gathered there this challenge: if you're not part of a ministerial, then join one. If there is no ministerial, then start one. Shortly after that, I was invited to co-host a workshop on church relationships at the upcoming YWAM North American Cities Network Conference. In preparation for this, I got to thinking, what kind of ministerials are there, and what makes a ministerial that affects change? I identified 4 kinds of ministerials. The denominational ones, they share common doctrinal beliefs. Regional, they meet regularly and are often cross-denominational. Prayer, meet regularly, and their prayers are normally focused on mutual support. Purpose, have come together to accomplish a common task. You often find those kind of ones in citywide evangelistic rallies and things like that. In my city, we also have worship leaders and youth pastors that meet regularly. In my mind, there is also a must-have ministerial. It's a ministerial that's seeking the heart of the city, willing to wait on the Lord. They actually pray. They're looking outside of the church. They want to go beyond relationship. They're willing to obey and act. They're willing to take risks. It's often a small group, and they're sometimes misunderstood. We started one of these in our city a couple of years ago. So how do you get there? Well, in the words of the 543 old patriarch of the Smurfs, Papa Smurf, we have to smurf to higher grounds. One of the current patriarchs in Christendom today, because of his wisdom, is a man that reminds me a lot of Papa Smurf, Ed Silvosa. In his book, Prayer Evangelism, Ed has this to say: parachurch ministries generally are more focused on reaching the lost than our local churches. They bring to a citywide effort a sense of urgency, a singleness of focus that makes them highly effective in helping to initiate the process. It helps to understand that neither local church nor parachurch ministry is a biblical term. What we call a local church is not a church but a local congregation that, along with many others, forms the church in the city. And parachurch, outside the church, is a misnomer, since no Christian ministry can operate outside of the church. Both are valid expressions of the church. They need to sit at the same table as peers, as both are equally essential to the city reaching thrust. Also, Both parties need to be in mutual submission and be given latitude to operate within their particular giftings. Every enterprise needs a man of war and a man of peace. The so-called parachurch ministries fit the profile of the former, the local churches, the latter. So, how do you get there? Once again, Papa Smurf has some very wise YWAM wisdom. That's what being a YWAM'er is. When it comes time, you just know what to do. Knowing what to do doesn't come from your head. It comes from the heart, where it matters most. In the September of 2014, we had the privilege of having Ed Silvosa in Victoria for a Transform Your World conference, and he brought this greeting to the global YWAM family. When you're ready.
Hello, I am Ed Silvosa, and it's such a pleasure, actually such a privilege, to be able to address the YWAM'ers all over the world. YWAM is my favorite mission. I'll tell you, when we built our organization, I borrowed so many pages from YWAM because you guys are kamikaze pilots with resurrection coupons in your back pocket. And you get blown up, you know, and then you resurrect and you do it again. And the impact of YWAM all over the world is phenomenal. Not only on the surface, but very, very deep. I myself have the privilege to sit under John Dawson, and I was just blessed by his brilliant mind, his analysis, and I owe so much, you know, to YWAM, and I would like to encourage you today. Lift up your eyes. Look beyond what you are doing. When the Lord said, lift up your eyes because the fields are white unto the harvest. He wasn't saying what you are doing is not good. What you are doing is good, but there is something better there. And my observation from the sidelines, but as a YWAM'er at heart, so to speak, is that YWAM was launched by your leader, you know, as an apostolic organization, you know, to lay down a foundation. And you did that to reach and disciple nations. But because you are also a servant people and a servant organization, so often YWAM'ers have, I don't want to say be relegated, but they downgraded themselves to waiting on tables. And that's okay. That is your heart. But I want to speak to you. Let that passion that God put into YWAM, into Lauren and Cunningham, and when he launched it, go for nations. And if God is leading you to lead, do not apologize for that. Do it in the power of the Holy Spirit, because there is no other organization with this DNA and no other organization with so many soldiers all over the world, totally bicultural, multicultural, and it's my desire, it's my prayer that YWAM will lead us in this journey to disciple nations. God bless you, and I thank God for YWAM and each one of you.
On the wall behind me in my office, you can see the poster of Martin Luther King Jr. In his speech of August 28, 1963, he entombed the words, "I have a dream." His dream was so powerful that 45 years later, America elected their first black president. We, as YWAM'ers, need to be willing to dream with the church of the city and work together to create a future that reflects God's purposes for your city. So I want to leave you again with this challenge. If you're not part of a ministerial, then join one. If there is no ministerial, then start one.